Welcome to The Kitchen Table, a show dedicated to helping you escape diet culture, gain trust with food, honor your body, and live a brighter life. Hello and welcome back to The Kitchen Table. I am so glad you're here. I'm your host, Alicia Brown, an anti-diet registered dietitian nutritionist. And if you could see me here at this desk in the basement, I know I'm still in the basement. I love these acoustics down here. But if you could see my smile right now, it is like from ear to ear because I have Paula here with me. Paula is a current / past client of mine. We still work together infrequently, but she actually came to some of my workshops early on as I transitioned my business from the weight loss paradigm to intuitive eating. And she had come to some of my workshops. We've worked together since, and I have her here with me because she so graciously is willing to share about her story and how she transitioned herself from the dieting paradigm into the intuitive eating paradigm. And she's willing to share a bit of why she came about that and how that impacted her life. So Paula is more than a client, she is a friend, and I have had the pleasure of witnessing this journey for her and continuing to see just like her growth and how she's evolved through this work. And it has been such an honor to witness. And Paula, you're just a rock star person just in general. So like, thank you so much for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Oh, awesome. Yes. So can you start by just like telling everybody like a little bit about who you are and how you came to like find intuitive eating, this diamond in the rough? How did you find intuitive eating?
Sure. So this was we just talked about how it was only a little more than a year ago, which is bonkers to me because time means nothing in 2020.
True.
So yeah, this was back in June. Last year, 2019 was a year when I don't know, I call it like my renaissance, where I end of 2018 into 2019 was just kind of saying yes to everything that came my way that I was even a little bit interested in. So whether that was health related or movement related or kind of creative related to creativity, just learning in general, I was really into workshops. So you had you did a 3-part workshop. I think it was on a Saturday, 3 Saturdays or something, once a month for 3 months last summer. And I found out about it through through Genstar Yoga, which is great yoga and like kind of community in De Pere here in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And they had advertised that there's this workshop called, and I forget exactly what you called it, but it had the word undieting in it.
Yes.
My
undieting workshop. Yeah, it was called Undieting. Yes.
But it had some little twang to it, like a real catchy little thing to it. Maybe it was the little tagline that went along with it, but I was like, yes, I want to stop dieting. So I'm in the intuitive eating world would be one of those professional dieters. I have done all the diets all the time, lifelong dieter. I've done the Weight Watchers, paleo, low carb cycling. The one time I did do a diet where I very expensive, very unsustainable was LA weight loss. I don't know if anyone listening has ever heard of that. It's not around anymore, I don't think. But that was a caloric calorie deprivation mixed with juicing, mixed with nutrition bars that you had to buy, mixed with like one sensible meal at dinner time.
Sensible,
like boiled chicken with no spices and raw broccoli.
Sounds sensible.
Whatever. So I mean, it did work, quote unquote work, when talking about weight loss. It was like the one time in my life when I lost a gross amount of weight. It was like 50 pounds in a very short amount of time.
Very unhealthfully, it seems like.
Very. And at the time I felt like, ooh, I got this. I am in control. But looking back, it was probably very damaging.
Mm.
Realizing that thinking that you have all this control was a good thing.
Mm.
Or even the thought of like being out of control in relation to food was just, it's a concept I won't go back to.
Seems like there's a lot of fear in that as you talk about it. Like there was this kind of like facade that you had everything under control, but also this like fear of being out of control at the same
Right.
time.
Right. So a lot of rigid rules, and then yes, this will be good if you follow them, and then inevitably there will be a time when you don't follow one of them, and then, you know, you failed the diet again, but like we're learning the diet failed you.
Yes.
So I do remember one interesting thing that got me wanting to learn more about intuitive eating was in that I couldn't remember if it was in the first workshop or the first of the 3 workshops or the last of the 3, and I think they were called, correct me if I'm wrong, but the first one was undieting.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was about enjoying,
Yes.
and the third one was it about
Nourishing.
nourishing.
Yes.
So
Those were so awesome. Like thanks for
those
coming
were
to all
fun.
those workshops
Those were
together.
fun.
Those were awesome.
I wish they were like 3 times as long, but
I know. And thanks to Gen Star Yoga, just like the local yoga studio for
yeah.
sponsoring those
I mean,
last year.
among other things, like that's probably one of the most valuable, you know, connections I made through that community that I've stayed with for, I mean, we'll be going on 18 months. So,
Yeah.
and in terms of dieting, I've never stuck with anything that long. So
Mm.
props to us, I feel like.
Even in that is a success, right?
That's the longest,
Totally.
that's the longest food body movement relationship I've ever had.
That's a
So
really cool realization.
yeah. But I remember, I think it was at the end of the undieting unit where I went into that with the idea of, this sounds really cool. I bet they're going to teach us how to lose weight without being on a diet. I just assumed that's what it was. And I remember sitting there and we were working in our workbooks and stuff, and I was just thinking, none of this makes sense to me. None of this can't be, you're asking me questions that I've never been asked before. Like, what kind of foods do you like? And I'm like, well, like I'm sitting next to some yoga, you know, real yogis, and like I don't want to say pizza, but it's like it's pizza, you know, like, and then you know, just questions that we'd never been asked before. And like, what would be on your dream plate? And it was like people around me had the same answers. Everybody, like, I remember someone said like ice cream. I want to have all the ice cream. And I don't know, it was just like okay to give those answers. And that was like then we kept going on, and I'm like, well, wait a second, none of this makes sense for what I lifetime learning of having to try to lose weight all the time. And if you're not trying to do that, then what are you doing?
Mm.
And then by the end of it, I think I asked you, because I was confused, and I said, well, what would you say though if like you have a client and they like all these like rules, you know, that you're teaching us about intuitive eating, but
Concepts.
then I learned that they're not rules.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that. But I said to you, well, what I like all these things, but what would you say to someone who still wants to do these things but lose weight? And you said, I would tell them that they're not the right fit for me as a client, and I would say that we're not a good fit to work together. And I thought, this broad is worrying, like, she is like a broad, first of all. This broad, hey, you see, she's willing to turn down clients and income because of what she believes about intuitive eating. So then that made me think like, holy crap, she is like serious about this.
I am.
And then
Yeah.
after hearing your story that you told us,
Yeah.
I'm like, you seem to be in a really good place with your, like, I just remember like the way you talk about food was in such like a dreamy way. And
Mm.
I was like, I want to follow her because I want to talk that way about food, about how it's, you know, instead of kind of being like ashamed to talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And I love that you bring that to the surface because yeah, I really am serious about like the anti-diet message that doesn't involve the relentless pursuit of weight loss. It's just
Hmm.
so true, and if I do have someone who's interested in intuitive eating, we really have to ask if they're willing to put their weight loss goals on the back burner so that we
Hmm.
can really let our bodies lead. And we should totally uncover that in another episode
Yeah.
just entirely on like why that's like so critical to be able to do that. But even that in of itself, yes, is so important. So like thanks for bringing that to the surface. And like yeah, and this
Yeah.
works, right?
And that makes sense because I know like at the end of that first intro, it was like basically an intro, the first of those 3 workshops.
Yes.
I was real uneasy. I was like, she's teetering this fine line of like, weight loss isn't a thing anymore. Well, now what do I do? Um,
Mm.
so that's, I mean, then I was really excited about the next unit, which was called Enjoy. And I'm like, yeah, I want to talk about food the way Alicia talks about food, like how it's just a positive thing and it's a delicious thing. And it's just so, I got like a real cozy feeling about the way that you talk about food,
Oh,
just like how it's like, looking forward to it. And like, instead of this whole thing where it's like, oh, I've got plans tonight and I was good all day and if I'm good all day, then I can go out and get those drinks and get extra things or whatever.
yeah.
And it was always it was a constant source of anxiety where it's like inevitably you're going to go out and get those drinks or whatever and get appetizers and eat too much or whatever. And then it was that whole diet starts tomorrow thing.
Mm-hmm.
And tomorrow
Yeah.
never came. It never came. So that was at the end of those 3 like kind of intro workshops, that's where I was kind of like, I want and I need more of this.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So the 3 workshops, just to recap for everyone listening, I did these last summer and these were so fun. And I titled them Undiet, Enjoy, and Nourish. And it was so beautiful how they kind of like unfolded in that order. And Paula, you came to each one of my workshops. And then after that, we had started our work one-on-one together. And then after our one-on-one work for that 3-month intuitive eating intensive, you joined my next program that lasted for another 12 weeks. So then we had a total
Mm-hmm.
of 6 months together plus the 3
Mm-hmm.
workshops. Is that right?
Yeah, so the first those 3 months, it was just like a 1 day per
Mm-hmm.
month thing, or like
Yes.
it was a couple hours,
Yes.
but yeah. And I don't even think that you mentioned the words intuitive eating to us in
Mm-hmm.
those 3 workshops. I think it was just kind of like a dip your toe in the water and see if you like what I'm doing thing.
Yeah, totally.
And from there, I know from there you said, if this kind of stuff interests you and like finding out more about um this whole like way of life type thing. And I did. I wanted to know more. So that's when you had that. I think we did a couple of one-on-ones, and then you were kind of in the middle of shifting and changing your client business model,
Yes.
and then it went to the 12-week group thing, which was a
Yes.
once a week, like it was like a 2-hour Zoom call
Mm-hmm.
a week. So
So how do you feel like your journey into intuitive eating has like changed your relationships with food in your body at this time?
um well, it's been a 180. It's been a 180. I'll say that food used to be a real source of my number one source of anxiety, and there's now none. There's none.
Mm-hmm.
um from everything from logging food and making sure that you burn more than you take in. And I mean, so many things beyond just like food and body even,
Mm-hmm.
that we realized over this time working together that I had anxiety about, that I didn't even realize what was causing it until we kind of like talked it out.
Sure. Unconscious anxiety, like just
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always, there's been how I will say my age is 38. So I have been a dieter for 23 years, probably 23 years. Um, so just like letting that go, the constant like the diet starts tomorrow and tomorrow never comes.
Mm.
Just having that be gone. And, you know, I know that some people who hear about intuitive eating, and I thought this at the beginning was, but oh my God, if you aren't keeping track and you're just kind of doing what feels right and what your body wants, you're going to gain weight. And then when you had told us, well, you don't, and in the books and things that you have us read, weighing yourself really isn't a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a very scary concept for people because, well, how do you know if you're improving or not?
Or it's quote unquote working, right? Like how
Or
is
it's working. Yes.
I love, is this
Quote
working?
unquote.
Really means like, is this
Yeah.
not having me gain weight?
And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it. This is kind of like going rogue or whatever, but I have checked in on myself on the scale a handful of times in the last year.
Mm.
And what is really, and this kind of pisses me off, nothing's changed. Nothing has, I have no stress about food. I'm ordering what I want. I'm eating as much as I need, but not more. Like I know that now.
Mm-hmm.
And here I was worried about, you know, gaining 1,000,000 pounds. Nothing has changed and I have no stress.
Mm.
So, you know,
What does
it's
that bring
just,
up for you? And kind of knowing that your body has kind of stayed the same.
it really makes me mad because I spent all that time and all that worry and all that anxiety for 23 years
Mm.
to only kind of, and I think I've got some ways to go in at least, you know, still making better choices and stuff with food and you know, more nutrient dense food, stuff like that. Still getting away from convenience foods and stuff. But I feel like I lost a lot of time. I feel like I could have been having more fun with my friends,
Mm.
not worrying about what tonight's going to bring because I ate this during the day and I want to do this tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like, I feel like, you know, victimized by the diet industry. Um, and I feel like I lost time. I feel like I lost years of my life of anxiety alone.
Mm.
And just the fact that I'm doing what my body, you know, I'm trying to uh, do things that my body wants me to do,
Mm-hmm.
not trying to manipulate my body with my brain. And nothing has changed. It's just, I could have been doing this a long time ago, a really long time ago.
And just to reflect on your experience as well, like you've spent so many years in the dieting paradigm, and now to feel like in the intuitive eating paradigm, like eating intuitively, it seems like there's just a greater sense of like liberation in that and freedom and reclaiming that time back that you've
Mm-hmm.
wanted to spend with your friends or in other ways in life. In what ways do you feel like intuitive eating, even beyond your relationship with food, has impacted your life?
Well, besides just, yeah, time with people, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of things more intentionally.
Mm.
Just even little things like getting together with a friend and having coffee is just much more than like, you know, like smelling the coffee and feeling the warm cup in your hand. And it's just like, I try to have everything be more of an experience than just like, well, we're going to meet for coffee and I know that we're going to Starbucks and they have those delicious like pastries and I know I'm going to order one. If I don't, I'm going to have 3 later, you know, just like the whole experience is like, you know what? I can't wait to meet with Alicia for coffee. We're going to
Oh,
get delicious, you know, like whatever we want to get. And we're just going to, you know, enjoy it. And if, you know, so I think like last Thanksgiving, I will say, I feel like the diet cycle for me was always, let's get New Year, let's blast things out on New Year's Eve, do whatever we want, and then diet starts tomorrow, right? And then things go well because I feel like it's easier to control things more in the winter. Then it starts to get warmer out. You want to start going out. You want to have
sure.
go to the breweries and stuff. Things fall apart by the summer because you're going to barbecues, graduation parties, showers, weddings. And then by the time Thanksgiving rolls around, it's kind of like all, well, I'll get started after Thanksgiving and then after the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's either that or trying to see if you can power through with your diet through the holidays. And that is terrible. But last Thanksgiving was the first time where we had just started, I think we just started the 12-week thing in November. So we had a couple of the sessions in by then.
Mm-hmm.
And moving into Thanksgiving, we had a big discussion about what's everyone going to do for, how are you going to bring intuitive eating to the holidays? And it was like the best holiday. I remember eating everything I wanted, not being overfull and having to fall asleep. I remember having more conversations with people. And I just remember that being really different from any other holiday.
Mm.
So like the quality of time with people has been better.
There's something really so real in that that's coming forth. That's just like this element of groundedness and presence that allows more connection to happen, more savoring the moment to happen. And that's such like a luscious thought and feeling. We all want to be present in our time spent with each other and present with the foods that we eat too. And I remember when you shared that you had like the best Thanksgiving ever last year. And I love that you brought that up, because that was the way that you described it was really blissful and very different, really shedding a lot of that anxiety and fear that you had maybe in past holiday experiences with food.
Mm-hmm. And I like the word that you use, the word luscious, because I've been using that word so much. Just everything is so delicious and luscious, and like, just that's how things are.
I mean, we could abbreviate it as lush, but then
Lush.
it's not as
No, it's not. It's not as delicious.
it's not as it has to have the syllables. Yes,
it does. And I think going along with that thing about Thanksgiving and like the lusciousness of the experience, I remember I think this was before the 12-week thing, but when we were working together just one-on-one.
Yeah.
I had shared with you that I had gone down to meet a good friend of mine in Cedarburg. I think I took a day off, and I just went down there, and we did, I might have slept over there and just did like a girls' night with my friend Mindy. And I remember we got up, and Cedarburg's a real cute town. It's you know, antiquing and little shops and stuff. And it's an artsy town over by Milwaukee, down by Milwaukee. And we got together, and I was trying to channel the intuitive eating stuff, and we went out for lunch. It was rainy, it was cool, and we got soup and a grilled cheese, like an artisan grilled cheese, and we shared it. And it was like just enough. And I remember the lighting was great, the restaurant was cute, we had just enough food, and it was like, you know, best friends, and we had a really fun time and a great conversation. And I told you about that, how it was just such a luscious experience. And you wanted me to unpack that and talk about what made it so luscious. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
But we made a list, and then I think you asked me, well, why can't meals, and I was just, you asked me, well, what can we do to make every meal such a luscious experience?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I could never be that comfortable at home in our and I described how our kitchen was this weird little old lady cottage style house, and we had just a weird setup in our kitchen, and we kind of talked it through, and you made me realize, like, hey, all I need to do is rearrange some stuff in the kitchen, and maybe our table isn't the right fit for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we took everything out of our kitchen. We got a new light fixture because we kept bumping our heads on the current light fixture that hung down too low, and it's the one that came with the house, the really ugly one. We got a new table, we got new chairs.
Yeah.
And we finally had, and I'll just say, we had this, our table, quote unquote, was this weird, tall little, it was really a kitchen island. And it was for where you store pots and pans on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And it had 2 bar stool height chairs. And the countertop was only on one side. So we were always sitting, my husband and I, we live just the 2 of us and our dog. We were never sitting face to face. We banged our knees on the pots and pans that were stored under there. So it's like we were always eating in the living room.
Yeah.
Separate areas. So that made us not ever cook like homemade soups or pastas because we're like, well, you can't eat that on the couch, it's too wobbly. So just those kind of things, like we rearranged our kitchen, and now we find ourselves able to sit down and eat different kinds of foods.
That is amazing.
So
And to
that's
feel like just changing your kitchen environment, change the types of foods you eat and prepare. Do you also feel like it changes like your intentionality with the
totally,
food and like the presence and connection that you're able to have with your husband as well?
totally. Like, let's set the table and let's use
Mm,
real dishes tonight, and let's, make something really, and it is done with more intention, and it's
yeah.
done with more of this like deliciousness, like not
Yeah.
let's just pop in a frozen pizza. Although sometimes we do that because we like a
Of
quick
course.
fix, and we like frozen pizza.
Yeah,
So, and that's okay. And that's what we do sometimes. But
absolutely.
we don't do it every day, and we don't do it for every meal.
Mhm. Yeah, so like that respect for the food experience, like no matter what it is, like having that respect and reverence for the food is like that different intentionality. That's a really
Totally.
cool experience. I invite any of the listeners right now that are listening to like think of like how they're enjoying food. Sometimes it's like not even about the food at all, but the experience of having the food, right? Like so many of us are like, moms just trying to like get food for everyone else. Like, okay, you want ketchup, you want this, it's like a scramble of like trying to make everything happen. And we can forget the intentionality, the presence, the groundedness. And I think that's one of like the best things about food at all is like the thought that it can bring us together. And I think that we so often forget that.
Mhm.
So Paula, in what ways like do you feel like intuitive eating has like changed your ability to show up in the world? Because we talk a lot on this podcast of being able to lead bigger, bolder, and brighter lives by sifting through a lot of our food and body stuff. And I'm curious for you because you've done a lot of like your sifting over food and body stuff, and you've released a lot of that anxiety. You've talked about like how you're really not anxious about food anymore. So like now that you've alleviated that weight, that metaphorical weight from
Mhm.
yourself, like what has that allowed you to do in your life differently that you can like just share with those listening about like how intuitive eating might impact their lives too?
Well, I think that yeah, like I said, there was just so much time wasted on worrying and on anxiety that it's just it's opened up, time better spent on other things. Um, Definitely, I feel like I've become more organized, and I love organization. I think of my
Yeah.
dream job would be professional organizer. If, money or constant paycheck was of no issue, I would, I would do it. I would just dive right in and be a professional organizer.
Oh, hit up
Um,
Paula, everyone. She'll
yeah,
organize your life.
but I mean, yeah, it's not worrying about, or refusing, not, I shouldn't say not having to worry about food and calories and crap, but refusing to think about, refusing to let that like take up time in my life. I mean, I know we've done a lot of stuff around the house that we've talked about wanting to do. Just I've had more time to be creative, which is what I'm like. I'm an artist by my soul. And I think that this was around another time that I was having where I just felt really disconnected to making and creating art.
Mm,
And this is part of the COVID stuff too, and like the lockdown,
yeah.
where I don't know if I hadn't have started my journey in intuitive eating, I don't know where I would be in this whole quarantine environment. I don't know how I would have gotten through that, because I think that there would be so much guilt
Mm,
um, about the not going to the gym because you can't, and not feeling like doing things because it's just too stressful. I
yeah.
don't think that I would be where I am right now with things had I not experienced the intuitive eating stuff, because that, thinking about the world this year and having the added stress of that anxiety about food, I don't know what I would have done. So
Mhm. So
I
you're
don't know
saying
if I answered the question, but
yeah.
sort
Well,
of.
yeah, I think that's a big thing because a lot of things that like derail people that are on diets are like big life events. Like maybe we can manage the diet and keep it all together until an event happens in our life, something really emotional, something traumatic happens, and then all of a sudden we can feel like we've derailed the diet, we've failed that, and we've failed ourselves, and that can lead to a spiral of really negative relationships with food and body being fostered, and also just like other negative health behaviors, because we're just trying to cope, we're just trying to manage. And so like knowing from your experience, and I can say this from my own experience and from other clients as well, that like yes, when we can eat intuitively, we can rely on the bodies and develop healthy ways to cope while having kind of a steadfast relationship with food, and maybe with movement for many people as well. So I think that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And as we kind of wrap this up, I would just love to hear, like, do you have any like message that you want to bring to women that are listening that might be like on the fence of exploring intuitive eating? Maybe they're not really sure. They're like dipping their toes into it, but maybe they're holding on to diet culture a little bit, but they want to see what their life could be like, if they ventured into intuitive eating. I guess first, like, do you recommend intuitive eating?
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and what might you say to somebody who's maybe like on the fence of like trying it out?
Well, I would say, and I have said, I know it sounds a little crazy, but just listen up, say.
You say.
Yes. And I have said, like think about never like keeping a little MyFitnessPal. Think about not having any anxiety about your Fitbit and not finishing, not getting in your daily amount of whatever's carbs, I don't know. And just think about having like, what would you do to have no anxiety about food? And I think a lot of people say, oh, I would do anything, but that's not realistic. But and even I was skeptical, like, well, especially about the whole, when I found out that it was truly unlearning dieting, instead of just a whole, well, this is a new way to lose weight that is just a healthier way mentally and better for your body. I would say, yeah, it seems radical to somebody who for 23 years or more have been bombarded with the message that you're not good enough, you're not wearing the right things, you're not, in the right size, whatever. That it is radical, and it's just crazy that like I said, I'm 38 and I just learned about it when I was 37, that it was even a thing and it had been around for a while. I mean, I would recommend it to anybody. And I don't know I don't think there's one thing that I could say that would make someone be like, oh, I'm diving in, I'm doing it, unless, it's hard to say, but I would recommend it to anybody.
Yeah. You're right. There has to be like a certain level of like openness and readiness and willingness to receive what intuitive eating has. But it seems like from your experience, you would recommend it kind of being out of the other side, having kind of like experienced all of the freedoms that comes with intuitive eating and all of the health maybe that comes through intuitive eating as well, in terms of your relationship with food in your body and with movement as well. And did you want to talk a little bit about relationship with movement for a moment?
Yeah. So what I've realized after doing the work, and like I said, it's still ongoing. I think it'll be a lifelong thing, but I will say I'm not going back. It's not a thing I'm willing to do. But what I realized is that, because in 23 years of dieting, what I've always done was have success, quote unquote, success in the weight loss piece, when I just grossly manipulated my food. And by doing that, I never felt the need to have a good relationship with movement. Like, I was never the type to be, let's cut our calories by 500 and let's do 500 calories more of exercise. I was more like let's cut out 1,500 calories, or, whatever, something ridiculous.
Mm.
And that did it for me. So that did for me what I thought was quote unquote working. So I didn't even realize till probably a couple months ago that I never really like garnished a good relationship with movement. And I've been like a on again, off again yogi, but really never got like a good routine with that. I've enjoyed running, but I never got a good routine with it. It was always like I felt like I would do those things coinciding with
With the diet.
with a diet. So,
Yeah.
and I always considered it part of a diet. It was never for fun. It was never because I felt like doing it. And so
There's some resistance to it. It seems like there's like
yeah, it was like a punishment. It was almost like
Yeah.
a punishment because the food piece went over a certain number or something like that. And it's always been like that since I can remember.
Yeah. Like a
Probably since
tug of
I
war
was
relationship with like how much
yeah.
you ate would dictate how much you moved or vice versa.
Hmm.
Got it.
Exactly. And I never got the two together. I never got the understanding with food and movement together as one in my mind and body.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that until a couple months ago, which would have been like more than a year after getting into intuitive eating. So it's still an ongoing thing. I'm
Yeah.
only just starting to know that my body feels a certain way. And that's like, oh, I could use a good stretch. I think you talked about that in your podcast, one of your most recent podcasts.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and it's like we can let our body lead not only with food when like really leaning into like the body sensations of like hunger and fullness and satisfaction and all of that luscious conversation since we're bringing lusciousness back, but also we can let our body lead like in terms of like how we want to move it. Like do we need a stretch? I love that. Like we're sitting at our desks all day. What would feel good to the body right now? What would sound good to the body right now? That can also not only apply to food, but also to movement in this way. And I love that like you're continuing to like receive the gifts from this work even a
Mm-hmm.
year later of just like there's more self-discovery to be had in this. There's
Yeah.
more allowing of the body to lead in this, kind of knowing that like it's already revealed some truth to you through the
Mm-hmm.
intuitive eating piece, but now how can we incorporate that in like the movement piece? And that
Yeah.
sounds like such an expansive bit for you to explore.
Yeah. And I feel like it's same with that. Like I've gotten so many little like treasures out of the whole thing in like over a year, but I feel like it's just getting started.
Yeah.
And it might be a whole nother episode or whatever, but like, do we have time to go into the clothing thing really quick?
Oh, yeah. Can you just go like the three tiers of
Really quick.
underwear really quick?
So
Yeah.
one of the things that you had kind of walked me through with in regards to the unfamiliarity with like movement and like being able to get into a like good routine with it was we kind of talked about like some fears and some things that were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And one of those things was, oh, I really like running. I like feeling when my chest, I can feel it expanding and I'm getting able to go longer and longer. But one of the things is like I'm like kind of chesty. So it's not comfortable to run. It's not. And so we kind of like we're like, well, what about it is it? And I'm like, well, just like boobs, And what I did was I invested in a very expensive sports bra, and it's made all the difference in the world. There's no movement, and it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that that's all I needed to make running
Mm.
enjoyable in that way. And now really there's nothing about it except like, I just don't feel like it. There's nothing really like holding me back. And we talked some things about like making sure like having things set up, like I need certain kind of music and playlists and all that. But then with the whole sports bra thing, we got into non-workout things that were uncomfortable, and that led to like clothing. And you talked about how you wear clothes, they don't wear you,
Yeah.
and that can be a whole nother topic. But we got into just times when I know in intuitive eating, one of the things that is really talked about is not having clothes that you save because they'll fit again someday. It's like don't live like that. It's not worth it. It's not worth
Right.
your time. It's not worth your money. Just go get some clothes that fit now and be comfortable. And we talked about like underwear, how I kind of described how there were like tier 1 underwear, and this is kind of fun. But tier 1 underwear they fit great. They're probably like maybe newer. They're the kind that just are so comfortable. And whenever you do your laundry, they're the ones that you put on first right away. You grab out of the drawer. And then they're like tier 2s, and they used to be your tier 1s, but they're, getting a little tighter because they've been washed so many times, and they might have a little hole in the seam, like whatever. But you only wear those like when your tier 1s are all in the wash. And then there's like tier 3s, and those used to be your tier 2s, or they were a couple sizes ago, or like pre-baby or whatever.
They're like the emergency underwear. Like
they're like, I'm not putting those on unless the wash machine is broke, and I am not. And you said in our group, Paula, why would you even? And I think we all had the same thing. We're all like, yeah, that's a thing. But we all you asked me, and then everyone in the group was kind of like, yeah, why am I putting up with underwear that go on my lady bits, my precious lady bits, that aren't comfortable and don't fit? So I am like, you're right. I threw out all my tier 1s. my tier 2s. I threw out all my tier 3s. And I went to like, I don't know, Target, and I got like 3 packs of the same kind of underwear that I like. I have all tier 1s. And that in itself was like, holy crap. I'm in control of this. I don't have to just like put up with what's in front of me.
Yeah.
Like that's a waste of time and being uncomfortable with something that little. And I got that from intuitive eating, which, working with you, people would be like, well, what do you mean? Like, you have new underwear? Big deal. It's a huge deal.
It's like this reclaiming of like what you want and not tolerating is like the greater message here of like, if we let our bodies lead, what are the things that we can have in our life, or what are the things that we need to let go of in our life that aren't serving us anymore, like the tier 2 and tier 3 underwear, or like how can we engage in movement that's not painful? Well, if we have like a supportive bra, we're able to do that. How would we know that if we listened to our body and wanted to work with our body rather than constantly trying to change our body or tolerating the stuff that's keeping us kind of in a funk? It's like, oh, you're so worthy and deserving of things that feel good to your body, food and movement.
It really is about just like the tools that it's exactly you are worth it. And it's like, it, like you said, how much was that trip to Target? $20? When you throw in like you went there for that and saran wrap, but you left with $200, it's like that was going to happen anyways when you went to Target. You know what I mean?
What is that joke about Target? You go in with a list of 3 things, you come out with
$200.
Like it's 200
every time.
Paula, I appreciate you beyond words. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experience in intuitive eating, all of these stories, from that cozy, luscious experience with your friend, to transforming your kitchen, to discovering what movement means for you now, to like transition from all of the dieting ways that you had into this intuitive eating way, and furthermore, how it's changed all these areas of your life. I just so appreciate you sharing this, and I hope to have you back on the show in the future. Maybe people would be curious about how intuitive eating, like from here on out, more than a year out, is changing your life and changing your relationships. And I'd just love to have you on again for sure. And just want to thank you right now so much for your time and your effort and your energy in sharing this. You are truly a gift.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to see what comes of our work in the future.
Cool.
I feel like there's a lot more to come.
There's a lot more to come. Heck yeah. Maybe it'll start in 2021. Well, with how the year's gone.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the New Year's Eve we're gonna have?
We're going to be excited for that, I think.
Goodbye 2020.
A clean slate and a fresh start, a fresh slate. Well, we can start that now, you know? I love that so much. Thank you so much, Paula. Appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Bye.